The Truth by Terry Pratchett, book review. So this is another book in the Discworld series. The last book in the Discworld series I reviewed was The Color of Magic, which was the very first book in the Discworld series. And at that time, my plan was to continue through in order, but unfortunately that plan has been scuttled. I went back to Japan, and in Japan, the selection of English books is much less, so you can't be too choosy. You just have to kind of take what's in front of you. Fortunately, though, there are plenty of Discworld books in the bookstores in Japan. You can't get all of them, and you certainly couldn't track them down in order, but you can get them easily enough. I think, by the way, that's somewhat because these books have always been more popular in Britain than they were in the US. And in the expatriate communities in Japan, of course, it's not only Americans, but it's British people and Australian people, and kind of all the expatriates are there. So when you walk into a bookstore in Japan, they will have a small English section, and that's the books there are kind of meant to appeal to an international market, which is how I discovered these books in the first place. They were much more popular among my British coworkers, and I found them in the bookstores in Japan. So anyways, yeah, I'm running out of complimentary things to say about Terry Pratchett without repeating myself. I mean, I always say his books are really funny. I always say they make me laugh out loud. I always say the plot is quite clever. Yeah, and this book, by the way, this is book number 25. So he's incredibly prolific. I don't know how he does it. This book in particular is about the creation of the newspaper industry in the fictional Discworld, in particular the town of Ankh-Morpork, which is the town where most of the Discworld novels take place. It reminded me a lot of Going Postal. Now, Going Postal chronologically was written after this book, but because I'm reading these books all out of order, Going Postal was the first one I read. So Going Postal kind of traced the beginning of the postal service in Ankh-Morpork. This book is tracing the beginning of the newspaper industry in the beginning of Ankh-Morpork. Also thrown in for good measure is a parody of the Watergate Deep Throat story conspiracy, and some light parodies of the Nixon-era conservatism and conservative values. So, quoting from a little section of the book, at one point, one of the characters talking about a conservative politician says, "Apparently, he's looking forward to a new era in our history and will put Ankh-Morpork back on the path of responsible citizenship, sir. Apparently, he wants a return to the values and traditions that made this city great." To which the other character responds, "Does he know what those values and traditions were?" said Vimes aghast. So some kind of light parody there. Also another plot point is the photographer is a vampire who has a fascination for flash photography. Now, if you think that a vampire is the last person who should be playing around with bright lights, well, then maybe you can see where some of the humor of this story is going. Now, this book is set kind of in the medieval fantasy world. So where does the flash photography come from? Well, like all the books in the Discworld series, Terry Pratchett explains away potential anachronisms by having magical imps, or everything's kind of powered by magic or magical imps. So they have cameras and tape recorders and flash photography in this novel, kind of all by having magical imps do kind of all the technology. It's very similar to that old Flintstones gag. You know, in the Flintstones, they had all this magical technology, but it was all kind of powered by dinosaurs. In this way, the same thing, all the technology is powered by magic and magical imps. It borders a little bit on corny, just like it did in the Flintstones, but for the most part, it's all good fun. So I'd recommend this book.